Good morning, everybody. Today is Thursday, August 4th, 2016, and this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Thursday, everyone. It is a balmy 81 degrees and very sunny here in upstate New York, so it looks like it is going to be another roaster. So where do we leave off from yesterday? We actually had Clint Richardson on as guest yesterday. Definitely, we don't have guests too often, so it was a special occasion. I had never spoken to Clint before, though I had listened to quite a number of his shows, and I find him very interesting. We talked about all kinds of interesting things, so if you didn't catch that show yesterday, make sure you go back to the archives and catch it. But I have another surprise today. We have another special guest, and this guest has not been on for probably about a year now. I think it was the end of last summer was the last time that he was able to join us. Mr. Brandon Turbeville is here today, and we are going to have some good conversations. I think we'll talk a little bit about Syria, Turkey, Hillary Clinton, of course. Some of the things going on with Hillary Clinton and the DNC and some of the people stepping down. I think we'll even look at Russia, NATO, and maybe even we'll take a look at a little bit of Zika. So welcome, Brandon. Hope you are having a great day off. I'm so glad that you were able to join us again. I don't know if you wanted to get into any of the Hillary stuff or how criminal she is, or actually, did you see now there's another, I think it was the CEO of the DNC is stepping down. Did you see that?
I saw that there's some more people stepping down. Of course, part of what this is the revelations that the DNC was conspiring to keep Bernie Sanders from getting the nomination. And I think when we talked last summer, I warned people that Bernie was just a steam valve, right? That this wasn't really a grassroots campaign. This was just a steam valve for people on the left to go out and get upset, feel that they had a political voice, and then have that steam valve run out of steam, and then the option would be to stand with Hillary or to just sit out maybe or vote a third party. And as you can see, as time goes on and Donald Trump makes more inflammatory statements or gets accused of making more inflammatory statements, then Hillary looks like a sane choice to people who aren't paying a bit of attention. And that's what Bernie always was, but still the DNC was actually actively trying to keep him out of the nomination process. They were trying to suppress his vote, suppress his support in favor of Hillary Clinton. And that's why Wasserman Schultz, who was corrupt from the very get-go, I mean, this woman was obviously corrupt from the start. That's why she had to resign, and now there's several others resigning as well. So if anybody, for whatever reason, had any faith in the Democratic Party or the ability to change the Democratic Party from within, this should be evidence that there's no hope for the Democrats and there's no hope for the Republicans. The fact that Hillary Clinton is the oligarch's choice, the establishment's choice for president, I think should be fairly obvious to everybody right now. We just had recently, in the last couple of days, a number of fairly high-profile Republicans attacking Trump and not officially endorsing Hillary Clinton, but leaning in that direction. George Bush is now attacking Trump. And just to be clear to any listeners out there, I'm not a Trump supporter. I condemn Trump. I don't want Trump to be president. The guy's a fascist. I don't want anything to do with that. But I am pointing out here that there is an establishment choice, an establishment preference, and that is Hillary Clinton. Of course, Bush and Hillary are both knee-deep in blood. They both supported the Iraq War. Bush spearheaded it. Hillary Clinton voted for it. Hillary Clinton went to the floor of the Senate and said that the intelligence that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction and was going to use them was undeniable. So at the very least, Hillary Clinton is incredibly incompetent, at the very least, and that's the best explanation. If we go to the worst end of the spectrum, this is, of course, willful deceit, and I believe, obviously that's what it was, because anybody could tell that Saddam didn't have those weapons of mass destruction. And where are they? The intelligence was undeniable. So,
well, didn't we actually, weren't we responsible for giving Saddam Hussein chemical weapons also?
Yeah, we gave him chemical weapons. And remember, when we were discussing going into Iraq, the Pentagon was giving their briefings and saying what we would expect if we went into Iraq. And they said, oh, well, you probably won't find anything but a bunch of old, dusty chemical weapons that were given to him decades ago. And that's exactly what they found. And now the Republican revisionists are out trying to say, they did find weapons of mass destruction. They found chemical weapons. Well, they knew they were going to find old, dusty chemical weapons that nobody could touch, because they were so old that they would fall apart and essentially give you the virus. So, of course, they sent American soldiers in there to handle it without protective gear. They knew this was going to be found. This was not included in the idea of the weapons of mass destruction. Remember, Condoleezza Rice said that we would have the warning sign in the form of a mushroom cloud. She said nuclear weapons. The other said that Saddam had chemical and biological mobile factories that were going around producing these things to be launched at Israel and to be launched at other sensitive locations. And that, of course, none of that ever materialized at all.
Right. But it somehow justified us to go into Iraq and be in the forever war that we're in now.
Yeah, it got us in
everywhere, the whole Middle East.
It got us in there. And now, of course, the explanation later on was that, well, Saddam was a bad man. He tried to kill my dad. We needed to overthrow a brutal dictator who was killing his own people. I've heard that a few times in the last 10, 15 years. Brutal dictator killing his own people. Then it was, we're in Iraq, we broke it, we have to fix it, and you're still there.
So
13 years.
Now let's take a look at Hillary Clinton and this whole Benghazi, Stevens, Turkey weapons, and we just went in and didn't we launch something in Libya here over the last few days?
We did. We just launched a series of airstrikes near Sirte, which is on the Mediterranean coast. Sirte is probably one of the most strategic areas that's held by ISIS fighters now, the Western-backed ISIS fighters. And the U.S. was requested, this bombing campaign was requested by the Libyan Government of National Accord. Now, what people should understand about the GNA is that it's not Gaddafi, right? It's not a central government to really speak of. It's a collection of people. After the Western intervention, Libya dissolved into absolute chaos and anarchy. We had about 4 separate governments in addition to Al-Qaeda and ISIS and numerous warlords and militias. And over time, a couple of these governments disappeared. And then we had essentially 2. One was on the eastern side, one was on the western side. And the Government of National Accord is essentially a hodgepodge and collection of very loosely assembled governing structures and politicians that's supported by the United Nations. Now, this is what is being referred to as the official Libyan government, but it's not what you would necessarily think in terms of an official government. Again, it's a loose collection of people who are supported by the United Nations. There's other governments out there, and there's still militias all across the country. Sirte, the GNA has not been able to establish control over Sirte because of the ISIS presence there. So the GNA requested that the U.S. go in and bomb ISIS, and that's what the U.S. is going to do. And it's not just bombing, by the way. There are special forces troops that are going to be deployed. They're already there. We already have special forces troops there. The French have special forces. The French have airstrikes. In fact, the French have regular troops, ground troops in Libya. And I think they just suffered about 7 casualties over the last few days. The number might be a little bit lower, might be 4. But all of that this is a bit of a difference between the bombing campaigns in Syria, because the bombing campaigns in Libya actually seem to be aimed at ISIS, at least in Sirte, because mission has been accomplished, which is the destruction of Libya, the destruction of the Libyan government, the killing of Gaddafi, and now the new puppet government is there. And so the idea is that ISIS doesn't really have much more use in Sirte. Now it's time to get back to business with a weak puppet government, impotent government, but one that is more amenable to the West. So it looks like the bombs are being dropped on ISIS in Libya. But in Syria, of course, it's a totally different story.
Yeah, I guess, now speaking about France and France coming in, aiding us in attacking ISIS. Now, poor France. France has been the brunt of quite a number of attacks this year. And they are in disarray. Are they in, martial law now? I thought I saw that.
Yeah, well, it's a statement, a state of emergency. So in France, I apparently there's something that's similar to a civil liberty that may still exist. I don't know where that's at. Maybe somebody will find it for us and let us know. Not exactly freedom and equality in France, but they've had a state of emergency for quite some time. And remember, after this last attack, well, not the last attack, but one of the attacks that occurred about three attacks ago, the state of emergency was extended, and everybody could see that coming from a mile away. What's interesting about France is that they've had a number of attacks where there are elements of a false flag. You can look at that and see the facts on the ground there are pointing to a false flag, but they've also had a number of attacks that appear to be real. Various stabbing attacks that could indeed be real and be a result of mass immigration from cultures that are quite different from France, to say the least. And of course, this is all going to get blamed on Syrian refugees and stuff, when the majority of them aren't even Syrian. I think there was just a stabbing attack this morning in France. Actually, the individuals were stabbed, and the guy who committed the attack was from Somalia. So if this is a refugee crisis, where the hell are the Somalians coming from? This is not a Syrian refugee at all. So there's a number of attacks that appear to be false flags. There are also a number of attacks that appear to be real, and I think that is probably, the real ones are probably the result of this open immigration policy, the clash of cultures, which once you get these types of things going, once you get the ball rolling with various different types of false flags, and you light the match, light the spark, then you could get a number of real acts of violence that are taking place across the country. And I don't think France is going to be done with these terrorist attacks by any amount, because I think this is going to be the new normal for both the Western European countries as well as the United States and Canada.
I just saw two top news from Pigmine's uploads last night was the new London knife attack too. So I think it might be time to start banning knives. I think the guys on Primer Time were talking about that the other night.
You know what? You can make jokes, but London has actually suggested turning in your knives because they're dangerous and can kill people. I'm not. You can Google that.
I remember that story. Yeah, and it does sound like it should be a joke, but it's not.
Yeah, it's a joke here because it hasn't gotten that far yet. But in England, it's gone pretty far. So the next stage is to turn in your knives. And
sporks for you.
Yeah, we'll all have to have spoons. Forks will be illegal soon enough.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, forks are dangerous, too. Well, not if they got the roundy thing on them. Sporks, you could do spaghetti pretty easy.
I don't know. I like to err on the side of security, Jules. I think we should always use spoons.
No pointy things.
No pointy objects, yeah.
No. So what else is going on globally that should make us feel really refreshed?
Well, I guess we could mention the young boy that was beheaded on camera in Syria. I don't know if you had a chance to see that or not. I
saw stills, but I refused to watch it.
Well, we have, I watched the video, and there's this group, Nur al-Din al-Zengi, or al-Zangi, however you want to pronounce it. It's a silly name. But they have this boy. They say he's under 12 years old, but he looks like maybe he's 8. And they have him in the back of a truck. His leg's already in some type of brace. It looks like he's injured his leg at some point. And they give a little introductory speech about Allahu Akbar, God is great, and all this stuff. And then they hold the kid's head up and they saw it off with a fairly blunt knife, or a dull knife. And what's interesting about this, of course, is that there's been many people out actually trying to defend the terrorists by saying that the boy, he wasn't 8 years old, he was 20. Well, all you got to do is look at the video. He's about 8. He's definitely no older than 12. And of course they saw off his head and do the usual dance around the corpse and Allahu Akbar and all that. But what's interesting about this group, again, Nur al-Din al-Zinki, this was a group that is moderate. This is a moderate terrorist organization. They're associated with the Free Syrian Army. This is John Kerry and Obama's moderate terrorists. In fact, they were so moderate that the United States, when they were going through their process of vetting groups, they vetted this group and determined that they were not associated with terrorism, they were not extremists, and then they provided them with TOW missiles. And that's reported by Business Insider. If anybody wants to check that out, there's a list of groups that were vetted, and this is one of the groups. So anyone who believes this foolishness about moderate terrorist organizations, that some are moderate, you have ISIS and Al Qaeda, and then there's these other moderate terrorist organizations, moderate extremists, whatever. Just take a look at the video and see the handiwork of the moderates. The other thing about Syria that I'd point out is we just had a really important strategic victory for the Syrian army. The Syrian military has officially encircled Aleppo. Now, this was something that's been going on largely since the beginning of the Syrian crisis, that the death squads and terrorists had taken over parts of Aleppo, and the Syrian military has been unable to take it back. Aleppo is the largest city in Syria, most populated city in Syria. And the Syrian military has been fighting for years to encircle the city so that they can cut off supplies to the terrorists inside Aleppo and then retake back their largest strategic city. And this has just taken place over the last 4 days. The terrorists, of course, had tried a counterattack to break the Syrian military's lines of fortified lines around the city. They were unable to do so. In fact, my sources are telling me that there were about 800 terrorists killed in this attempt to retake strategic roads and supply lines back into Aleppo, and that failed. So we're looking for, in the next week, if the Syrian military can hold their encirclement, then it might be the writing on the wall for the terrorists inside of Aleppo, and we certainly hope that's the case. It's still going to be a long battle to take it back because there's going to be obviously a siege, and terrorists are going to fight to the death. But we are indeed very happy that this has taken place, that this encirclement has finally happened, and so the end may be near for the terrorists in Aleppo.
Well, here's a couple questions. So, did we just find out from the second email leak, I believe, the WikiLeaks email leak on Hillary, that she absolutely had something to do with arming those terrorists, right? Or at least the moderate rebels, quote unquote.
Well, yeah. Well, they knew it was going to ISIS and Al Qaeda. This wasn't really a new release, to be honest. This had been released for, I believe, for some time. That they knew very well that in Libya that the weapons were going from Benghazi into Syria, and that this was well known.
Well, I mean, you and I discussed that even a year ago. We talked about the weapons going from Libya to Turkey, and then the CIA, I believe, it came out and had been training the quote-unquote moderate rebels, right? And then sending them in through Turkey.
Right. That we discussed that. Oh God, we discussed that 2 years ago. Maybe
Yeah,
3.
at least.
At the very beginning of this thing, we were talking about that. And it's what the document though is revealing is that both Clinton and Obama knew very well that the weapons were coming through Benghazi with Christopher Stevens, and that they were on their way to terrorists in Syria. And some of those ships left and went into Turkey, and some of them actually went into Syrian ports themselves. They were rather small boats at the time because they were trying to avoid inspection, and they would go to ports that had smaller amounts of traffic. But this is what those documents have revealed. And again, I point out to Hillary Clinton, are there no scandals that this woman can't withstand? If that points out that she is the establishment choice, right? There have been so many scandals. There's been, 4 scandals in the last year?
My mother, can I just tell you, like when I show my mother this stuff, she is one of those, she got caught up in the Obama stuff, and I'm not going to say that I didn't, but I at least woke up. She is still in this haze where my father and I start showing her all this stuff about Hillary, and she tells me that it's hearsay. That they're just making this stuff up. I'm like, they're not making this stuff up. I offered to give her your book. Said, you need to read this, but it's all hearsay, but it's not hearsay. And this woman has managed to, I don't know what they're doing to people to get them not to want to believe. I mean, I've seen friends of mine that I've known for 30 years posting on Facebook about what a wonderful time it is to be a woman and how they've fought for this for 30 years for women's equality, and now we're going to have this woman be president. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? You're that lost. You are that off the rails that they don't see any of it at all. Like it just didn't happen.
I couldn't think of a greater enemy to women and children than Hillary Clinton. And this is a woman who fought for a pedophile that she knew, a rapist that she knew was guilty. She fought for him to be freed and released. She pulled all kinds of dirty tricks to get him freed, and then she laughed and bragged about it later on.
Was this when she was younger, when she was an attorney?
Yeah, this is one of her first big cases. And this is a woman who went after the women who accused her abusive husband, disgusting husband, who's had a long line of sexual abuse scandals, not just the White House blowjob incident. There was many more than that. There were some actual rape allegations, right? This was back when he was governor, even I believe as president. And Hillary tracked these women down, threatened them with all kinds of things.
Well, S.M. Gibson had that Juanita, I don't remember her last name, but one of the women that had accused Clinton back when he was governor, and she was on for about an hour and talked all about being stalked by Hillary Clinton. I mean, it was pretty insane, and I got to tell you, I believe everything that woman said.
Yeah, so this is the champion for women, right?
Yeah.
This is the champion for women. If Hillary Clinton once said in a speech that if a woman claims that she's raped, that she needs to be believed, not even be listened to, but believed. I guess that doesn't apply when
to her people involved in her circle. Yeah.
Bill. So, and not to mention all the women and children that she has signed off on having killed in Syria and Libya. So it's a long trail of blood behind this woman. But what's interesting to me is the hardcore Clinton supporters do seem to be showing the signs of being in a cult. That there is a refusal to acknowledge that the woman has done anything wrong, ever. And which one might be able to do that with somebody like Obama, because nobody knew anything about it. Right.
There was no history there. He just came out of the blue.
And there still isn't.
Right.
So it's hard. It was harder to pinpoint some of these things. Although I should walk that back a bit. There's a number of books that have indeed explained a lot of Obama's history to people surrounding him that point to to point to what he is, being a CIA creation.
Yeah, and I've seen some of that research even back in the beginning with that Obama shuffle, that private investigator. He dug up a lot on just it definitely, if nothing else, it was very suspicious. His Social Security number being tied to some dead guy in Connecticut who retired in Hawaii. I don't know if you saw that too. And all the shell. What was that?
I haven't seen that one. I know Wayne Madsen and Webster Tarpley have both done a lot of good work when it comes to Obama and his history. But
back to Hillary. Just your book is one example of many of the examples that are out there that have done some great investigation into scandals that are out there. I mean, look at Vince Foster. If nothing else, you have to say that was kind of suspicious. And add him to all the other things that came before and after. And how can you not have at least a seat of doubt? If you were in a court and you were a jury and someone was presenting a case for you, all they ask you to have is a reasonable doubt, right?
Right. That's my point. With Obama, there was doubt because there wasn't a published history on him necessarily, except for the people that I mentioned, Madsen and Tarpley. So the average person is not going to look and say, what's he done in his past? What about all this? They're not going to remember things about Obama. Hillary Clinton, not only is First Lady of Arkansas, First Lady of the United States for 8 years, then Senator, then Secretary of State, and every single position she's held, she's had scandals.
Right.
This woman has been in the news for decades, and it's all been bad news, right? Do you have any idea how easy this book was to write? She was absolutely in the news almost every year with some type of new scandal. But there's not an acknowledgement of that from the hardcore supporters. In fact, if you finally get somebody to admit that maybe she did do something, like have a record of being 100% pro-war in her entire career, she's never opposed a war, they will simply respond, well, Bush did it, why can't she? Obama did it, why can't she? And we're getting to cult level. I mean, all you got to do is look at the woman's eyes and see that there's something off there. She has the psychopath look on her face every time that she speaks. She talks like a robot. I could go on and on. But what's funny, and again, we have Trump on the other side. You'll hear from people on the left, Hillary Clinton people, that if Trump gets elected, well, he'll just push the red button. We'll start another war. We'll be in another war within a year. Again, not an endorsement of Trump, but I do believe Trump was opposed to the Iraq war. Hillary Clinton voted for it, and again said the intelligence was indisputable. Hillary Clinton supported publicly her husband's wars during his tenure. As she supported the Afghanistan war, she supported the Iraq war, she perpetrated the Libyan war, she perpetrated the Syrian war, and she even said that we should obliterate Iran. That's in the book, right? She says that we should obliterate Iran, and she's even threatened Russia. Her war
and she had the reset debacle, if you remember that whole thing. Do you remember that with Menendez or whatever, however you say his name? She gave him that big reset button, except the translation was wrong.
Oh, I don't. Are you talking about Ahmadinejad?
No. With you were saying Russia. She did the reset when she was Secretary of State. They had this whole reset plan with Russia, so they were trying to reset relations, right? We're going to get us back off on the right foot. So she stepped in as Secretary of State, and they gave her this big red button, and it said reset on it. Except that when she gave it to, how do you say his name? Their Secretary of State, Menendez, Medvedev, something like that. Yeah, lots of V's. But she gave him the button, and the button was mistranslated with something that definitely did not mean reset, like it meant push the button. And I don't know. just kind of set the stage for the future. I mean, the woman is a war hawk.
The only person I know who has a war record that strong would probably be John McCain.
Yeah,
and I don't know of anybody else. Maybe Lindsey Graham, but to be honest, Lindsey Graham has appeared to be a bit more tepid about his wars than even Hillary. So I don't understand. I understand the idea of charisma when it's somebody like Obama. I understand charisma even when it comes from somebody like Trump. Hillary Clinton has the charisma of a fence post. This is not what you usually have with a cult leader, but this is without a doubt a personality cult. And I think we're unfortunately going to see President Clinton in 2016.
That's frightening. And what's Bill going to do? I mean, Bill's not looking too good, you have to admit. Yeah,
he looks like an animated corpse, and he's probably going to do what he's always done, which is help fly drugs and fly on jet planes with young children and all that kind of stuff. So he'll probably have a good time. He doesn't actually have to even go out and give good speeches anymore, which he seems incapable of doing now.
Yeah. Did you see him on the DNC? He looked like a robot.
Well, back when he was president, there's video footage of him waiting to have his hair fixed and his makeup put on so he could go on camera and deliver an address. And he actually looks the same. He looks like he's not there. Like there's something just completely gone. There's no soul. There's no consciousness, except when they cut the cameras on and then he immediately delivers a powerful speech. Very interesting. People can go look that up. I think should be readily available on YouTube.
So, something else that I saw recently that made me chuckle, speaking about Secretary of State and the State Department, is did you see now, I think it was El Nusra, now has officially gone on record with the State Department. They've changed their name in the ledger so they can make sure they cut the checks correctly. Did you see that? They've done that a few times. I've seen them come out and announce when they changed it from ISIS to IS and ISIS to ISIL, right? And then ISIS to Daesh. They put out an official announcement that the terrorist organization was officially changing their name. Like, what? Why would the State Department be documenting all that? I mean, I guess so you could refer to them correctly, but it just seems a little suspicious to me that they're putting out official State Department documents with the name change for the record.
Yeah, I guess maybe they'll repost the announcement from Amaq. Remember, this is the ISIS newsletter. They have a newsletter. I think
the one that's on the internet?
Yeah, this is their news website, and then there's one called Dabiq, I believe, which is...
Yeah, Dabiq was the one. Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of them. So basically, if you want to go out and protest Hillary, you want to go out and protest the Federal Reserve or do something for the environment, your Twitter account can get shut down and your Facebook account can get shut down. I got suspended for posting something about Syria on Facebook recently. But if you're a member of ISIS, the most dangerous and wanted terrorist organization across the face of the earth, committing atrocities and left and right, the U.S. government is looking for you to destroy you. They just can't manage to cut the website off. The ISIS has Twitter accounts. They'll post up announcements and they'll say, "Oh, this was reported from ISIS tweeted support for this terrorist attack or this terrorist attacker." Really, because mine got shut down just because I mentioned Syria. It's funny how they can have Twitter accounts that get national news coverage. But yeah, it's now Fatah al-Sham, I believe. It's Nusra. It's the same thing. It's hard to even pay these things attention. The idea is to change these names enough to where people just get totally bewildered and they don't know what's going on. They think one's a moderate, one's not a moderate. Even the State Department, though, even the State Department and the Russians have agreed that this is still Nusra and that it's still an extremist group. But if people who are watching just want to make it simple for themselves, if it's a member of a rebel coalition or a rebel group, it's a terrorist. To quote Lavrov, if it looks like a terrorist, and it walks like a terrorist, and it acts like a terrorist, it's a terrorist. I think that's an accurate description. If it's not in the Syrian military or part of their alliance, it's a terrorist. And that goes for the YPG, who wants to fight with the Syrian Democratic Forces that are Western backed. If they want to establish their own country out of Syria and Turkey and Iran and Iraq, then they can put themselves on the side with the West, because they're playing into the hand of the United States.
Now, speaking about Lavrov and Syria, where is Russia right now in all of this? So Russia got involved. They wanted to be part of the coalition. Then I remember seeing something out of the State Department saying that Russia's aid was over, and they started pulling out troops. And I really haven't heard a lot about Russia and Syria now since then. What's going on with all that?
Russia never really pulled out troops. They've removed a number of forces from the field, and this was simply changing the strategy, right? The first phase was over. They were moving in the second phase. The Western media jumped on this to make Russia look weak, to say that Russia was abandoning ship, and they're not. They just flew over Aleppo. I can't remember the exact number, but it was an extremely large amount of bombing raids outside Aleppo, and that is really what turned the tide in the battle, were the Russian bombings. The Syrian military were bombing there too, but the Russians are really what got the job done there. It was at least 70 sorties that were flown that day around Aleppo, so they're still there. In fact, a Russian helicopter was just shot down, and the terrorists who shot them down dragged the corpses out of the helicopter and started hopping up and down on them. That made some mainstream news. That tends to make mainstream news for Western propaganda outlets, because they want to send it back to the Russian people that they're getting caught in a quagmire again. It was apparently shot down with a Tau missile. Again, that's something that only vetted organizations get from the United States. And I would like to remind everyone about John McCain's infamous statement on the media, where he said his solution for Syria would be to give the rebels Tau missiles so they could shoot down Russian jets like we did in Afghanistan. So I guess this is the McCain method. The dead pilots and I would imagine the beheaded boy. Now we could attribute that to John McCain's handiwork. Another individual who I'm not sure is mentally capable of anything really than just repeating what he's told. John McCain and Hillary Clinton. She should have picked him for a vice president. It would have been a great team.
I'm surprised she didn't, actually. So now, what about the Turkish coup? That's the one thing that we haven't touched on at all. Erdogan is still in power. He's a Western puppet doing their bidding.
Yeah, he has been, and this is where it gets a little murky, because I really can't call this one either way. We're going to have to wait and see how Erdogan reacts. I think there is one direction in which this is leaning, but basically in Turkey there's a number of different factions. You've got the Erdogan faction that goes along with the AKP party, Justice and Development Party, and then you've got the nationalist faction, the Kemalist Turks, basically the tradition of Ataturk. They're generally connected to the Turkish military, what they call the deep state. It's not exactly what we mean when we say the deep state. This is the sort of structural, functional element that holds the military together, these nationalists. They've been friendly with NATO, but they also are friendly with Russia and with other neighbors. In other words, they just simply, they're willing to work with anybody, if it's to the benefit of Turkey. Nationalists meaning they believe in, Turkey first, which is fine. And then there is, another faction around this Fethullah Gulen. He's this Turkish businessman, this kind of strange religious cult leader who is based in the United States. He owns one of the largest charter school and private school networks, and he's very close to the CIA. We've got a number of reports that detail his connections to the CIA. So these are the main factions. And of course you've got other political parties. You've got the Kurds. But in this element, these are the three factions people have to look at. After the coup, the coup that failed, Erdogan blamed Fethullah Gulen and his networks and said that the United States was essentially behind Gulen's attempt. So Erdogan starts purging Gulenists, or people that he calls Gulenists. Gulen is notoriously secretive, so it's not really sure who is a Gulenist and who isn't. But he also starts purging nationalists. These guys seem to be some of the biggest targets of the purge. And of course, anybody who's ever criticized him, right? There's, I believe, 60,000 people have been either arrested or purged in some way. That's an extraordinary number. They said 99 generals were purged. Again, that's extremely large amounts of generals. The United States, I think, only has a few hundred generals, and we're the largest military on the face of the earth. So the question is, who really launched the coup? If you look at who benefits, well, Erdogan has benefited, right? Because he's been wanting to get rid of the Gulenists, he's been wanting to get rid of the nationalists for some time.
Can I ask about the teachers? Didn't I see there were like 6,000 teachers or something that were rounded up?
I think there may have been more than that.
And I also just saw that they had some mass. Did I see them with I don't know if it was a prison or a mass grave that they were just getting together?
Well, there may have been. I believe there's already been beheadings.
Oh.
Pro-Erdogan mobs. And of course the pro-Erdogan mobs would be the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan works with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Which is who is also running Egypt, right?
Not anymore.
They were though.
Yeah, with Morsi.
And that was another one of our puppets.
Right. The Muslim Brotherhood, I think, particularly people on the right get this one wrong, very wrong, because I've heard so many conservative people who will say that the Muslim Brotherhood has infiltrated our government. Well, the Muslim Brotherhood was a creation of British intelligence to fight Arab nationalists when they were engaged in imperialism. And it's always been that way. The only difference is the CIA has now moved in and joined forces with them as well. So Erdogan has been pro-Muslim Brotherhood, and that's been sort of a problem with the Saudis. Saudis will occasionally work with the Muslim Brotherhood, but they don't like the Brotherhood because they're not extremist enough. So when you ask who benefits, in that sense, Erdogan benefits. But there's another question. How did Erdogan react to the United States? If he believes it was the United States who funded this coup, why didn't he do anything? He didn't recall, he didn't expel diplomatic staff. He didn't recall diplomatic staff. There have been statements that Turkey would go to war with any country that funds coups in its borders, but we don't really think Turkey would ever go to war with the United States, but they haven't shut down Incirlik. Why not shut down the U.S. Presence in the Incirlik air base in Turkey? They haven't done any of that. Now, the question would be, you will be able to tell who's behind this coup by the reaction and the behavior of Erdogan. And if he moves closer to Russia,
which I saw they had some agreement they were working on.
Yeah, the idea was if he moved closer to Russia and to powers that were not necessarily amenable to NATO, then we would know that maybe this was indeed a NATO-backed coup, a U.S.-backed coup. And Erdogan has indeed moved closer to Russia. They've talked about establishing this Turkish Stream pipeline. They want to. Erdogan apologized for the shoot down of the Russian jet. Actually, he did that before the coup. But he's now said that they want to tighten relationships between Russia and Turkey. Erdogan is traveling to St. Petersburg on the 9th, just a few days, and he thanked Putin for expressing so much support for the Turkish government during the coup. So that behavior points to the fact that maybe it was the United States behind it. And why would the U.S. do it? There is a motive, because before the coup, it seemed that Erdogan was warming up to Russia, right? He apologized for the shoot down on the jet. There were some other discussions that were taking place. There was an element of cooperation that was starting to pick up. So many people who are on the side of the U.S. did it will say they did it because they were afraid that Erdogan was moving closer to Russia. They were going to lose a strategic ally, and they wanted Erdogan gone. There's also a strain of thought that says maybe Erdogan did this with the United States in order to purge the nationalist element, because the nationalist element has actually been, when I say they're willing to work with everybody, that's true, but the U.S. isn't really willing to work with everybody else, right? They don't really like Turks saying Turkey first and everybody else second. They want people to say, the United States, Britain, and Israel first and everybody else second. So that they're against the nationalists. And if Erdogan worked with the United States in order to provoke this coup in a sort of false flag method to get rid of the nationalists and get rid of a lot of the Gulenists, that's another strain of thought. But Erdogan recently blamed the shoot down of the Russian jet on his nationalists and his Gulenist opposition, which doesn't really make sense, because what he's essentially saying is they did that without his knowledge and without the knowledge of the Turkish government. When he went on TV and started, saber rattling against the Russians, if it was truly somebody else doing that, he could have worked to smooth that over. So I don't necessarily believe that. I believe that's opportunism to blame something that didn't go his way on the enemies that he's purging. So at this point, we don't really fully know, but there's, I guess, more evidence tending to point that the U.S. may have been behind this, but there's still very odd behavior coming from the Turks, so we just don't really know. We can't really put our finger on it and point to it just yet.
Well, I saw also that I believe it was Kerry threatened Turkey that if they started assassinating people or beheading them or whatever they're doing, putting them into death camps for this coup, that they could lose their NATO status.
Yeah, I saw that. Well, we could make a lot of comments about that. That's obviously a statement that was made politically, right? Because nobody's claiming that Saudi Arabia should stop doing those things.
Right.
Kerry never says anything about that. Kerry never says anything about any genocide unless it has political motivation. So if Kerry is threatening Turkey with that, we have to wonder, was the U.S. behind the coup or not?
Maybe they got double-crossed.
Possibly. And there's also the possibility that Kerry is, again, just saying this because everybody's looking at Turkey now. The U.S. has to condemn it, but behind the scenes he's just saying, just wait a few months and don't do it on camera,
Right.
And then we'll just be fine. So, but it is an interesting statement that he would bring NATO up, in that question.
And I didn't even think that Turkey was officially a NATO country, that they had thought about inking, but I don't think they ever inked, did they?
Oh no, they're
they
full
are
on
official.
NATO, yeah.
Okay.
I did a series of articles on that, when it was clear that Turkey was using their territory to send in terrorists into Syria, that NATO was harboring terrorists. I mean, this is a NATO country that's harboring ISIS that NATO is supposed to be at war at. It's bizarre to anybody who doesn't understand what's really going on there.
So, in our last few minutes, if you can even believe it, it's been almost an hour. What do you want to touch on? Do we look at Zika? Do we look at this next step right up? We're going to get you with some DNA vaccine.
Yeah, we can look at Zika. I think one of the funniest things, it's not funny, but it kind of is in a way. We had these reports about Florida officials going door to door asking for urine samples. And again, they say
I couldn't believe that. I could not, when I saw your story, I could not believe that they literally were asking for urine samples for this disease that up until recently no one even paid attention to because it didn't cause any major issues.
Right. That's what's so that's what's kind of comical about it. Right. I think there have been connections to what it does to children, although I think there's been debate about that, whether or not it causes encephalopathy.
Yeah, there is lots of debate.
Yeah, so I think some people have said that, it can cause birth defects, and other people have said no, it can't. But if that's the case, that is the worst side effect. If you look at what happens, they say about 80% of the people have the virus. They don't even show symptoms,
right,
at all, ever. And then the 20% of the people who do have symptoms, it's joint pain, red eyes, rash, fever, right, which can last a few days to a week. So it's kind of like a weak version of the flu.
Right.
And we're gonna have, martial law over this. It's not that bad of it's not that big of a deal.
And they got this $1 billion bill, and I want to say I talked about this last week or maybe the beginning of this week that I had found online that it looked like it had gotten passed, but I saw in the news that it had not gotten passed. Congress went on summer break, and it is sitting in the wings now, and now they're trying to decide whether or not they're going to call Congress back into session for this emergency to approve this $1 billion in funding to fight Zika. But, we just saw the very first case showed up at the end of last week in Florida, down near Miami. Now, there were 4. And now there's 14. And we've gone door to door and we're collecting urine samples, and we need this $1 billion. They announced yesterday that the U.S. government, this is out of MIT Technology Review, the U.S. government has started tests of the Zika vaccine in humans, and this is the brand new DNA vaccine. Mad science gone mad. We've talked about this shape-shifting immune system that DARPA's been funding at different universities and things to fight any type of future pathogen. Your body will be able to mutate and change your DNA on the fly to make you immune to it. I mean, talk about after they had we had Ebola, right? All your be very afraid of bleeding eyeballs and orifices, and then we had Johnny ruining everyone's Disney vacation with his measles, or his lack thereof, measles vaccine. So we've put the fear into everyone. So now we have the Zika epidemic that everyone should just be so frightened over. And I don't know if you saw too on AccuWeather, they now have a whole new section that gives you your Zika alert number, or mosquito alert. Like somehow in New York State, where we don't get a lot of moisture or humidity, and it's not really ever hot for any extended periods of time, we're at a mosquito alert 7. I should look you up sometime, because I bet you're at a 10. We have Southwest Texas in the desert, where it's 100+ degrees every day for months on end. There it is, mosquito alert 10. How's that possible?
Well, I'm sure we're at a 10 because these things look like drones here. But, I'm sure they'll get a lot of political capital out of this. They'll get some bills passed while everybody's focused on Zika. They'll roll out a few new vaccines. They'll get us debating whether or not we should have martial law, forced vaccination, forced medication. And then once they get you debating whether or not you have rights, you've lost them. And this is every single time. The people never win the debates because they're not meant to. Remember, this goes back to torture. When we had the big debate, should we torture people or not? Well, the debate ended, and we should torture people. Doesn't matter what the Constitution says. Doesn't matter about human rights. We should torture. When it was Ebola, it was the question of whether or not people should be forcibly quarantined, forcibly vaccinated.
Yeah, I did a story on that on Nancy Media.
Yeah, all kinds of panic, and of course we tended to come down on the side of quarantine and forced vaccination. And this is what's going to happen with Zika, because it's all over the news. It doesn't matter the fact that the virus doesn't seem to be that bad, and the virus isn't even really spreading that much. They'll still generate panic, showing that there's no elements of a panic that can't be generated from virtually anything.
Right, now they said it can spread like any way. There was some mystery case now in Utah where they don't have mosquitoes of some guy who passed it on to his caretaker, and it wasn't through any type of bodily fluid or anything of that nature, and they don't know how it happened. And even more mysteriously, inside his body after he died, the virus was multiplying billions of times, and they've never seen that before. So I don't know if you remember, but like after Ebola, and they thought they cured these people, quote unquote, there were relapses, and the virus was like mutating in different body parts, like eyeballs or testicles, and they'd never seen that before either.
Yeah, and it's funny now, we've also got, I think in Russia there was anthrax.
Yeah, we just talked about that. Yep. And antelope.
I know we're running out of time. I do want to point this out to people, though. If you're worried about disease and the spread of disease and worried about why we're having more disease now, more spread of disease in the United States now more than any other time, the main reason we're seeing that now and the main way you can prevent the spread of disease is increased living standards.
And I'm sorry, but that's the end of the hour. Yeah, increased living standards is exactly it, and climate change. All right, guys, have an awesome Thursday, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Everybody take care.